This is what happens when a camera company loves film photography so much it stops making film cameras entirely and builds a digital tribute to it instead. This is the Fujifilm X Half, and in many ways it's kind of a love letter to old school candid point and shoot half frame film photography of yesteryear, just written in binary. 110101. It's stylish, it's super creative, it's incredibly charming, all traits I seem to lack apparently. But most importantly of all, it promises all of the fun of shooting film without the never-ending cost of film. Now, all of that sounds great, right? Well, I thought so too, but unfortunately there is one pretty big reason why I think a lot of people will never buy this camera, myself included, but we'll get onto that in good time. For now though, one thing's for certain, this is absolutely adorable. It's like somebody shrunk an X100 and fed it through a Wes Anderson filter. It's got all of the retro rangefinder vibes, and yes, it shoots vertically by default, just like the original half-frame film cameras it's referencing. Fujifilm has clearly gone all in on this concept, from the name to the vertically orientated screen and even the viewfinder. Sure, it's a vintage nod, but let's not pretend it's not also tailor-made for the TikTok/Instagram generation. Vertical by default just so happens to be the perfect format for social media content, and that's clearly who Fujifilm are winking at with this. To put it bluntly, this is aimed squarely at the people who want to capture a photo of their lunch and make it look like it was shot on expired film. Now, one thing that makes that abundantly clear is the fact that this is a JPEG only camera. That means no RAW output at all, which is pretty radical for a new camera in 2025. Though for a Fujifilm camera, that's not really an issue, as you get access to Fuji's full suite of film simulation modes, including Provia, Astia, Classic Chrome, Acros, Velvia, Eterna, and even the two new ones, Reala Ace and Nostalgic Negative. Now, these looks are applied in camera and baked straight into your JPEGs, and honestly, they look great. There are also some new photo filter modes, and I'll admit, usually when I hear photo filter modes, I think NAF toy camera mode and sepia tone, which no one with any ounce of style would ever touch with a barge pole. And I mean, there are some of those modes, but there are actually some pretty good ones too. My favorites being the light leak option, which will randomly add light leaks across the frame, which is pretty cool, as well as an expired film mode, which gives you, well, an expired film look. So does that mean that this isn't a serious camera and is just a gimmicky toy? Well, yeah and no. Now, it's clearly not built for professionals, but that doesn't mean that professionals wouldn't love using it. In fact, I'd argue that that's one of the best reasons to actually own one. You see, when you take photos for a living, reaching for your full-frame mirrorless camera on your day off can sometimes feel like you're just adding more work to your life. More RAW files to back up, more editing, more unpaid hours sorting through 45 versions of the same sunset. But with something like this, it strips the whole process back to just shooting. You're freed up to actually enjoy taking photos again with no editing queue, no pressure, and no perfectionism. It's far enough removed from work that it actually makes photography feel more like play again. And I, for one, really appreciate them having the balls to actually do that. So whilst it may look like a toy, does it actually feel like one? Well, although the build quality is pretty solid, I wouldn't say that it's totally up to the usual X series standard. It does feel slightly plasticky, and all the buttons and dials don't have the same satisfying click that I'm kind of used to. But in this instance, I think that's okay, because the lighter weight materials they've used and the super small size make this incredibly portable, weighing just 240 grams or around 8.5 ounces, and that's with the battery and the memory card included. And on that note, they haven't skimped on that either, because inside this thing they do have a full-sized Fujifilm battery, the same you would find in most X series cameras, and they've even made space for a full-size SD card, which is absolutely the right answer, by the way, because it just means that this camera can slip more seamlessly into your existing Fujifilm equipment. Now, in terms of features, overall, this is a fairly basic setup. There is a viewfinder, but it's not an EVF, and it's not a hybrid viewfinder like the one you'd see on the X Pro cameras. No, this is just a piece of glass without any frame lines, any heads-up display, or even an AF reticle. Does it work? Well, yeah, actually, it does work pretty well. It just lets you compose your shots like you would do with a disposable disposable or a vintage film camera, mainly guesswork with a little bit of intuition sprinkled on top. But honestly, if you're someone who relies heavily on a viewfinder for shooting, then this probably isn't going to do it for you. Now, there are also very few dials and buttons on this camera too. There's no mode dial, no joystick, and no command dial, just an exposure compensation dial on the top that sits around the shutter button, and then there's also this manual aperture ring around the lens. You may have also spotted this little lever here, but we'll talk more about that in just a minute, because for now we need to talk about this rear screen, because yes, this is vertical too, though it's also fixed in place, so no tilty action for shooting from the hip, unfortunately. Then there's also this secondary screen to the left of it, which is for quickly swiping through the different film simulation modes, which is pretty slick. Now, without a joystick or a D-pad on the back, you've probably already guessed that this camera is predominantly controlled using this touchscreen, and you can access the different menus by swiping up, down, left, or right. And I will admit, it did take a little bit of time for me to remember where everything was, but once I did get used to it, it worked perfectly fine. Though there is one area where I think Fujifilm may have dropped a bollock, and that's with this flash. Now, I'll be frank, this isn't a flash. This is just a very cheap LED light, and that's shown in the results that it captures. Because rather than getting that cool onboard flash disposable camera kind of look, you instead get a scamera kind of feel, which really isn't a look that anyone is trying to achieve these days. But don't worry, you can always add an external flash.
How about new?
Yep, they've done a Lumix S9 and gaslit us into thinking there's a hot shoe port under here, when in actual fact there's just a slot for adding accessories. What accessories, you're asking? I have absolutely no idea, but thanks Fuji, I think. Anyway, enough whining. What's it actually like to shoot with? Well, in a word, kinda slow. 2 words, but you get my point. But I'll admit, not entirely in a bad way. You see, it encourages a more deliberate style of photography. That said, it's not always intentional slowness, because the autofocus isn't blazing fast. It's contrast detect only and hunts occasionally, especially in low light. On the plus side, you do get some focusing tools like face and eye detect, but don't expect a miracle performance. It's more of a quiet, wander around town and snap freely kind of camera. But anyway, let's get back to this lever on the top, because you're probably dying to know what that's about. Well, yes, this has been designed to look and somewhat operate like a manual film advance lever on a camera that doesn't shoot film. And no, this isn't just some sort of visual gag. It actually does do something. Well, sometimes. Now, when you're shooting in regular mode, and you'll see what I mean by that in a moment, pulling this thing out will actually activate the 2-in-1 diptych mode, not to be confused with dick pic mode. That's a totally different thing, as I found out the hard way. Basically, once you pull this lever, this blue light on the side here will activate, which will show you that you're in diptych mode, and then you can take a shot and the camera will mash together that shot with the shot that you took before it, so that you get 2 images side by side in the same photo, a bit like this. It will also retain individual copies of the 2 photos, which is nice, and as you'll see a little later on, there are more options for customizing your diptychs using the accompanying app. Now, I should also note that pressing the lever inwards, as in towards the body, will give you a quick preview of the last photo you took, which is obviously handy if you need a quick reminder before you commit to taking the second photo of your diptych. But arguably, that's not the primary function for this lever. You see, if you swipe down on the screen, you'll see an option for film camera mode. This mode locks the camera into functioning like a film camera, in the sense that you need to commit to a specific type of film, or Fujifilm film sim, and then you need to choose between either a 32, 54, or 72 roll of film. Now, you can end the reel early if you want to by simply double tapping the side screen, but once you're in this mode, you are in this mode until the reel ends one way or another. That means you can't review your photos mid-roll, you can't change the film sim, and you can't access the settings menu. Instead, you're treated to this rather charming analog-inspired display that shows you how many frames you've taken, basic exposure settings, and a focus distance indicator, because you don't have the luxury of having the live view either. And in this so-called film camera mode, this lever now makes way more sense, because it actually functions exactly how you would expect it. Shoot a frame, wind the lever to advance to the next one, and so on. Now, I'll be the first to admit that when I heard about this whole concept, it gave me the biggest photography boner I think I've experienced in probably the last decade, because personally, I've been wishing for a camera just like this for a very long time now. So, after shooting in this mode, did it give me the satisfaction that I have been craving? Well, almost, because for me, one of the things that makes shooting with a proper classic film camera is the tactile mechanical operation. The ratcheting lever, the heavy clunk of the shutter, the pressure gauges and exposure needles, all of that stuff makes it feel super satisfying. This doesn't give me any of that, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but this lever just feels about as cheap and plasticky and hollow as you can get, and there's no haptic feedback and no faux ratcheting as you wind it on. It just kind of feels loose and a little bit broken, although it's not. Now don't get me wrong, it's far from being a terrible experience, but it's still away from being truly film-like. Anyway, what happens when you get to the end of your film reel? Well, the film camera experience doesn't quite end there. You see, once you've finished, those photos are actually hidden away in a digital darkroom somewhere deep on the SD card, and that means that your camera doesn't let you preview the shots until you develop them using the accompanying smartphone app. And so that means you're going to need to download the accompanying X Half app. Wait a second, that's not the X Half app. That's today's sponsor, Surfshark. That's right, Surfshark is a VPN that protects your data, secures your connection, and gives you peace of mind when you're online. Whether you're uploading photos, browsing on public Wi-Fi, or streaming the final season of Yellowstone from a questionable hotel connection. Now, personally, I've been using Surfshark whilst traveling, and it's been brilliant for staying secure across multiple devices. No sketchy tracking, no location-based price gouging, and no harassing ads following me around just because I once googled best travel tripods for under $50. I don't need one, alright? I was just curious. It also lets me access region-locked content, so whilst I'm here living in Canada, if I get homesick and I want to watch a bit of classic British comedy, then no problem. I just switch locations and it's like I'm right back in good old Blighty. You can even use it to find better prices on subscriptions or flights by bouncing your locations to a different country. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee as standard, but the best part is that right now you can get 4 extra months free when you go to surfshark.com/Calton or use the code Calton at checkout. And as always, for ease, I've left a link in a pinned comment below and in the video description. Anyway, back to the X Half app, and it actually does feel a bit like you're developing a roll of film. Not because of the process, obviously, it's just a wireless transfer, but because of the way Fujifilm's designed the experience. The app doesn't just dump your photos into a folder and then call it a day. Instead, you're greeted with a little contact sheet of your roll of film, which is a really thoughtful touch. From here, you can either create those 2-in-1 diptychs that we've already spoken about using any of the images that you've taken, which, to be honest, is a much better way of doing it than using this thumb winder experience. The app also lets you do some basic styling like choosing borders, frame layouts, colors, and all of that stuff, which I'm sure is all very fun if you're into that kind of thing. But what about the actual image quality? Well, inside, this camera uses a 17.7 megapixel 1-inch type CMOS sensor, which has actually been mounted vertically inside the camera, allowing it to cater to the camera's pretty unique vertical 3:4 aspect ratio. Now, in the front of the camera, there's a fixed 10.8mm f2.8 lens, though once you factor in the crop, it produces an image that looks closer to that of a 35mm lens in full frame terms, which in my experience is a pretty flexible option for most types of candid photography. It also features a leaf shutter too, which is pretty cool, but without any means of being able to sync it to an external flash, it kind of feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. That said, despite the smaller sensor size, overall the image quality is pretty good. I mean, it's good enough for what it was intended for. This was never designed for pixel peepers, but rather for those who want decent image quality for posting online or for creating modest sized prints, and in which case it definitely fits the bill. Now, before we start to wrap things up, let's quickly talk about video, because you may have noticed this switch on the back here that turns it from stills to movie mode. And yes, technically it can shoot HD video, but with limited options, no mic or headphone input, that means this is probably never going to be touched by most users. The results kind of look like they were shot with an early webcam rather than being a desirable vintage kind of feel, so if you need decent video whilst out shooting with this thing, just stick to using your smartphone or draw it on the pavement with charcoal or something, same difference. But now, we arrive at the plot twist, ladies and gentlemen. You've been charmed, you're feeling all nostalgic, and you're thinking, maybe I'll get myself one of these. Well, you can, all for just under $850.
Fuck off. Fuck right off.
For a camera that doesn't shoot RAW, has limited autofocus, a borderline usable video mode, no hot shoe port, no IBIS, and not even a proper flash. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what they were thinking when they came up with that price, because there is no way this is an $850 camera. $500, now we're probably talking, but for me, $850 puts this squarely into the realm of cameras that will only ever be purchased by those with either a lot of disposable income or a serious gas problem, or both. Now, back in the day, half-frame cameras were the poor man's entry into film photography. This is so far away from that ethos that it kind of makes me feel a little bit sad. It's kind of like the camera equivalent of a Disney remake. It promises all of the nostalgia, fun, and stylized charm that you once remembered, but when you actually experience it firsthand, something doesn't quite hit the same, and you can't help but shake the feeling that maybe the people behind it might just be exploiting your warm, fuzzy memories to line the insides of their pockets. Now, that said, call me a sucker, but I still kind of want one. I know it's not perfect, but damn is it fun and refreshing to shoot with. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be buying it full price. Absolutely no way. I think I'll probably wait a few years, maybe try and find one on Facebook Marketplace for half the price with a cracked screen, dead pixels, and someone else's ex-girlfriend's name engraved on the bottom, because at that point, it might feel a little bit more authentic.